Think about it. Every hiring decision is a choice that can make or break a team, a culture, and even an entire company. So how do we make the right choice? Hi, I'm Dr. Mickey, and welcome to Inside the Mind of Hiring. Here we'll uncover the psychology and strategy behind effective hiring, because the right fit isn't just about skill or experience. It's about understanding people, their motivations, their strengths, and the shadows of their shortcomings. Together, we'll tackle the tough questions. How do we look beyond bias? How do we find the qualities that make people not just qualified hires, but the right hires? This is about identifying leaders who drive success, lift morale, and actualize a company's vision. Inside the Mind of Hiring starts now. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Mickey Fineberg, and this show is Inside the Mind of Hiring. And today we're going to talk about inside the mind of hiring really good project managers on a consistent basis.
Oh my God. Dr. Mickey, let me ask you this question, because once upon a time, somebody said to me, project management was a lost art. Now, fast forward to where we are now, automation, COVID. I've never seen more of a need for outstanding project managers than I think we need now. What do you think?
I agree. Especially with this construction company that I did this project for. My goodness. In the summer of 2017, I would say a commercial and industrial facilities design build construction company came to us to enable them to select good, competent or better, excellent project managers on a more consistent basis than they were doing before they came to us. Even before they came to us, I discovered that project management is an extremely, extremely important profession in these days. Very important. Just like HR management, there are associations or institutions or companies that are just there to support the development and feeding of great project managers throughout the country and throughout the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's organizations that specialize in helping project managers be on top of their games. So, this is really an important position and competency for a lot of different companies. Particularly, it has been in IT and for sure, and definitely in the construction industry.
Oh, yeah.
And definitely, this is a mission critical job for this company that came to us. The project managers are the drumbeat and heart of this company. Without good project managers, they're not going to be successful. They're not going to grow. And it's a design build company, so they're responsible for designing the project or the facility.
Wow.
Designing it, making deals with subcontractors, because they're the general contractor and they hire subcontractors for each project. Of course, they're responsible for executing the project and making customers what the company calls them, make them raving fan customers.
Yeah.
Got to really make the customers thrilled, not just satisfied. So that's a really important responsibility. And interestingly, this company believes in hiring their project managers right out of school. So it's important for job seekers to know that. There are some companies that would rather hire their project managers out of school. And it's the educational fundamentals are mechanical for this company and civil engineering.
Yeah.
And they might even hire them as interns during their junior years, but sometimes they'll just hire them right out of their senior years, and or even they'll hire them even well before they graduate, but they're ready to work there after they graduate. They believe in training and enculturating project managers without they're developing the baggage of bad habits working for other companies.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I was going to ask you about that because I worked in facilities management for over 10 years for the AT&T system
Mm.
during the time of divestiture. Now, if you know anything about what that means that, you know, I was one of the people that helped break it up and then put it back together in a sense. However, I was shocked at the facilities management end of that divestiture. It required extraordinary project management. And I have to tell you, there was one major screw up that
Yeah.
cost Belcor a lot of money, and it was picking a location in Morristown, New Jersey, across from a park for a Class A research lab.
Mm.
Do y'all know what that means? Class A, toxic material in
Yeah.
Morris. That battle went on for years. And
Wow.
one mess up like that. Now, I will say that the people that made that decision weren't the project managers. It was the project managers that put it back together.
Wow. So they solved they dug the company out of trouble, basically.
One of the most ridiculous, stupid choices for a Class A research, clean room stuff, Dr. Mickey.
Yeah. Yep.
But project managers have to do that. That's part of their job.
It
Let's
can
talk
be.
about this. Let's
Clean
talk about
rooms,
this for a
part
minute.
of it. Yeah.
I remember interviewing somebody for a project management job, and I asked him one question. I said, "What do you think of Stephen Curry's idea to start the project with the end in mind?"
Mm. Not a bad
Now,
idea,
not a
actually.
bad idea. The answers were, who is Stephen Covey and what end do you have in mind? And automatically I crossed them off the list. But let's start with how you go about it, if you don't mind.
Well, it's being able to project the quality of the contract of the project managers this company is selecting. And they didn't feel like they were doing a good enough job of selecting people without the right testing component. They were using assessment, and I'll get into what elements of that and how they ended up in our research on developing the program. But I want to talk how, basically, I'm going to make this as fun as possible, but talked about how we developed the program for them and how we've been executing it with them, supporting the execution of the program for the last 7 years. And the company's, thank goodness, has been growing by leaps and bounds. They were a regional company. Now they're a national, very much a national company.
Mm.
They're in all major regions right now. So they're growing like gangbusters, and love the company. It's a really great company, great culture. They talk about work. They have a work hard, play hard culture. So all their offices have things like ping pong tables there. Because people have a tendency to stay late a lot, and they want them to relax and have a little fun while they happen to be at work. Not that they don't want
Yeah.
them to go home once in a while, but they want them to have fun while they're at work.
You
So it's
can't
a
go
work.
home in a job like that. Let's just be
Yeah.
very clear about what the
Yeah.
industry is.
They don't sleep there, Pat, but
They don't. That was Bell Labs. They sleep there.
yeah.
But this is the kind of industry that is not a 9 to 5 job. You have to
Right.
stay in the game if the game goes sideways. You just can't go home in a lot of these situations because the dollar amount associated with a project that is off track, isn't
Right.
that enormous?
It is. It is. It's a major cost factor, but if you're not satisfying customers, you're not going to grow either. But you can have some with key mistakes. You can have some heavy duty cost issues
Oh my God, yeah.
with projects that go the wrong way.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can get the customer or the client to correct for you and pay for. Sometimes you got to eat it yourself, and you don't want to do too much of that.
No,
So,
you don't.
so what we decided to do, we were looking at two regions on the East Coast, two regional offices, and they had a combined head count of project managers of 17, which is a little bit of a small sample size. We'd like to see sample sizes of 28 or more. But what we decided on was to still go with what we call a performance-based validation strategy. And that was to create a test performance relationship or correlation beyond chance between tests and the actual performance levels of the project managers that they have that we had in the sample. So we decided to take a risk with a smaller sample size and see how it worked out. And it started with a job analysis. In order to do a study like this to establish the right test program, you got to understand the job. And so we got into that by interviewing good. We only wanted to interview good project managers. So we interviewed about 5 or 6 of their best project managers because we want to interview the people who really knew how to do the job, really knew it. And we went on and we walked around a job site. We observed the job site, walked around with the project manager. He talked about, what he was looking for, where they were, at what stage of the process. It was pretty new in the process. It was all foundational at that time. But we walked around and saw them interact with the subcontractors and everything, and saw them interact with customers either in person or on the phone, and got a sense of how the job operated real time with not just interviewing. Of course, we interviewed supervisors, or I would say the regional managers or the people that manage the project managers, and the division president happened to be on site at one of these 2 regions. So he knew what was going on with these project managers, and he really had a lot of stake in this study as well. And he was relatively local for us. So we got to know the job pretty well. We looked at performance reviews that they did. We looked at products such as blueprints and designs and things like that. So we kind of immersed ourselves in really understanding this job. And from that, we developed what we call a success profile, a profile of testable, has to be testable.
Yeah.
Abilities, aptitudes, and personality traits that tend to relate to success in the job, how we knew it. So anytime we make a statement like assertiveness, we always talk about assertiveness for what? Why does that impact job success? So that's what the job profile looked like. And we got approval from management. And then from that baseline, we went out from our own knowledge of assessments or tests, wanted to maximize the online capability of these, delivering these tests. We went out and also researched what was out there, and we selected what we call a trial battery or trial package of tests to try out on their existing project managers. Okay. And so we did that. And, the aptitude tests included such abilities as what you would think, mechanical reasoning, practical verbal reasoning, math capabilities. We also selected a conceptual reasoning test that we didn't think would work, but we selected it anyway because we thought it was kind of like a nuts and bolts type of practical thinking kind of job. But we tried it anyway because it was a short 5-minute test, so we decided to include conceptual reasoning. And then we had about 4 or 5 personality tests that we tried out as well. So these are trial tests. We're not using them in the final analysis. What we're going to do is test their actual project managers with these tests. Okay, so we selected tests, and we got the project managers engaged by telling them. We wanted to make sure that they weren't too anxious. We didn't want them to be too anxious or even angry that they had to participate in a relatively long testing process, because in the final analysis, you're not going to use all those tests. So we assured them that the data was going to be analyzed on a group basis, not an individual basis, that their test scores, that we weren't want to talk about anyway, we're in no way going to impact management's perception of their performance. That was their
Yeah.
performance that was going to impact perceptions of their performance that had nothing to do with these tests. And we also, build them up that they were trailblazers, that they were helping their company
Yeah.
take these tests. They're going to test drive these tests, like test drivers, we call them.
Yeah.
Just like, and it was going to result in a test program that was going to help then the company select worthy peers of theirs. So they would have team members that are project managers are going to be worthy to be, worthy team members, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, so we did that. Now, some companies actually pay their participants in these studies.
Some of them do.
They do, they give them gift cards and things like that for
Yeah.
participating, but they didn't feel like they had to do that. And actually, in terms of the final analysis, they didn't have to do that because we felt that the results that we got were valid.
Yeah, it's also when you do that, it presents a bias. It automatically presents a bias about gifting, and it gives you that gifting mentality. So there's this form of cognitive dissonance that happens during a test where you're like, damn, why am I going to give them the real answer when they just gave me that 200? So it keeps that out of it. That was very smart to do that for this kind of pilot.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it work. I've seen it work with some kind of gratuity for getting involved, but it didn't have to happen in this case. It really never has to happen. But Dr. Powell, I didn't even think about the bias that it could create, but because but they didn't do it, and it didn't need to be done, basically. So we tested these poor people to death, but no, it didn't take them that long to do it. But I would say it was a good 3.5 hours to actually do the trial testing. So the other important component of this was to get valid performance data on this team. They were in 2 regions. This 17-member team of project managers. And basically, in this particular study design, we put them in either 2 performance categories. One was competent or better, or mediocre and not as good as mediocre or worse, basically. Okay. And we worked with, often we work with teams of 4 to 6 people that supervise the position or manage the position. In this case, we just worked with 2. We worked with the regional manager, who basically had both regions, and we worked with the division president, who was really into this study and had a lot at stake in it being successful. So he worked with I wanted to have at least 2 knowledgeable people of these project managers to give me valid measures of performance, because if they're not valid measures of performance on either category, competent or better, mediocre or lower, then you're going to have a problem. So those measures had to be valid, and we discussed each person in depth to make sure that the discussions were in depth and would lead to valid decisions. And it was interesting that they didn't agree on every person. So I had to ask key questions to get them to get into perspective on their disagreements and make valid decisions and to resolve their disagreements in a positive and valid way. So we categorized each project manager in one of those 2 performance groups. Okay, and we found that 8 were mediocre or worse.
Wow.
And 9 were competent or better.
Wow, that's a bit eye-opening, Dr. Mickey, right there. That's like a 50-50 split.
Yeah, well, you wonder why they were even keeping the project managers, because a lot of times
I wasn't going to say that, but
yeah.
We'll have to do the show. We'll have to do the next show of what now?
Right.
Once you discover this, what now? But what did the results show you? I mean, what did you take away from this that you're now using?
Yeah. Okay. So the test results were interesting, particularly on the cognitive side. we found that conceptual reasoning was a reliable differentiator of the two
Yeah.
performance groups.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why is that? This is not the land of concepts. Well, what these
Mm,
project managers have to do is they have to deal with a lot of divergent and detailed data. And it's not always going to tell the right story. And they have to they have to tell the right story from the information and data that they're getting, from the standpoint of managing these projects. And the data that they have to put, they basically have to thematically interpret the data. What's really going on here? What's really important here? What's the big picture here? And that's
exactly.
what conceptual ability allows you to do. We discovered that it's really important for making important decisions. And it's really important in terms of being cogent communicators with your customers, with the subcontractors, with the government, local government officials that are often involved in these projects. So it's a really important element of decision making, cognitive skill for decision making and for communication.
Yeah, I
And
think, look, I think it's one of the most important, really. And I'm going to tell you why. You're building a house.
right,
You're the person, foreman, whatever you want to call them. You're responsible. Are the windows ordered? But then there are the individual pieces.
right,
And the electrician comes in, and the bottom line is, yes, the electrician needs to know, are the walls empty for me to work? But the electrician doesn't necessarily want to keep track of whether the driveway's paved. So conceptually, if somebody can't put all the pieces together, I don't even
right.
know how you become a project manager.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And what you're talking about is really important to know what's important at a given time and what's not as important at a given time. And it's important to know where to spend time at a given
It
time,
really is.
right? Right. So we felt that this was, management really liked the idea of the test too. It was one of the tests that I gave to you when we were fooling around with it. I gave it to you verbally, which
Yeah,
is
I
the
remember.
traditional way of doing it. So it's talking about how two words are alike that become gradually more divergent from one another. And there's only 10 items, and it's the time you get is 5 minutes. Uh, the other tests that came up were kind of interesting too on the personality side. There were several personality. Okay, I don't know if I said this, but mechanical, math reasoning, practical reasoning washed out as non-predictive. Um,
Wow.
some of the tests we use there. Personality tests, energy, which they associated with passion.
Hmm.
Um, Assertiveness, there was a measure of assertiveness. Not all tests of assertiveness are going to
I
predict.
don't even understand how you do this job without a measure of assertiveness. I
Yeah,
really don't. You can't,
right.
not in a construction company.
Right.
Seriously.
If you're walking around a job site and you don't like something that maybe that a subcontractor is doing, you have to come up to them and talk to them in a positive way, but you have to assert yourself. You're going to be in trouble because it's not going to get any better. You can assume
No,
it's going to change, but it probably
it's
won't.
not. No.
Right. So that came up. There were other measures that came up too. It's important. Diligence, of course, conscientiousness came up in terms of one
It's got to
measure.
be up there.
What really kind of interested at us was risk orientation came up. The higher, the better. The name of the scale happens to be mischievous, but it's a scale of risk orientation. Um, but what we had to tell them in the guidelines that we provided that high scores could also mean undue social risks that could be a problem, like we were talking about last week, like sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So you have to
Yeah.
be careful of that, but being obviated. But positive risk taking is really important in this role, and being bold and confident was
Yeah.
another important measure. But there
Nobody
were
listens to you in a construction
right,
site if you're not bold and confident. You might as well go
right.
home.
Right, exactly. So, but they thought that being humble and humility was an important factor. But you had to be careful about minimizing that. But there were two-edged sword aspects to this boldness measure too that we had to advise them about. Because sometimes if you're too high on this particular measure of boldness and confidence, it could mean that you distance yourself from mistakes and some other things too. That you could also be a little bit too dominant or intimidating toward people. So we didn't, we had to advise them of that. But the higher scores on tests of,
Yeah.
believe it or not, mischievous tendencies and bold and confident tendencies were definitely important. They were winners for this particular
So let's, I know we got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure people understand what the outcome was to this now.
Yeah, well, there was also want to say that being people savvy, socially sharp, and empathetic and tolerant was also a measure, and it was a counterbalancing measure with the other measures that had some risk to them. So that was important too. So what's the punchline? The punchline is they've been using it for 7 years.
That's a good punchline.
and I wasn't the interesting thing, what we do, we have a small job. The project was fairly capital intensive, but it was only basically half the salary of a not relatively new, but a relatively competent project manager. It was less than half the salary for somebody like that. And you think about it in those terms, it's not a bad investment. The other aspect of it is all we do for them, we don't know, sometimes we install a validated test and don't support it in any way, but we provided guidelines for, for getting the results.
Yeah.
We provided cutoff score guidelines, of course, based on the way the sample worked. And we basically set them up. We set up each candidate on the online, for the online assessment access.
Yeah.
What
let me jump you to this because we're out of time.
Oh, we are.
Yeah.
Oh, we are.
Yeah. I want to just say this. The study speaks for itself. Why? The way you opened up the show. One, company's growing. They're expanding. Yeah. They've been using it for 7 years.
Right.
So what is the value of this type of assessment? Everything. If you look at the company's expansion and results. And I think that's the punchline. And the fact that you're giving guidance to this and not just dropping some kind of questionnaire on the table, that's project critical.
Yeah. It's administered at a very low cost basis. The only thing I do is I score the concepts test. Because there's a lot of
only. That's the only thing you do.
Yeah, it's subjective.
That's a big job, Dr. Mickey.
Yeah,
I mean,
know,
you can't do that. Look.
There's such variation in it.
But not with an expert.
Yeah.
You're the expert.
They're hiring more successful project managers more often.
And the company's more successible. That's the punchline.
Right. Absolutely. We were able to also give them some tips on improving their interview process. I want to say to everybody out there, Dr. Mickey and I'm going to tell you, I have a deep respect for project managers. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen decisions made by AT&T to take a building. You have been listening to Inside the Mind of Hiring with me, Dr. Mickey Fineberg. Tune in the first and third Tuesday at 11 on Transformation Talk Radio to discover the psychology of making successful hiring decisions. In each episode, hiring managers and HR pros will learn how to leverage assessments and other key screening sources and avoid common pitfalls. Job seekers will gain insight into successfully presenting themselves. For more information on assessing people for mission-critical jobs and on career assessment and coaching, visit deltaconsultants.com and my LinkedIn profile. If you'd like to write me personally, it's Mickey, Mickey, @deltaconsultants.com.